So we're going to be talking about using I to simplify radicals. Sorry, my handwriting's a little bit messy. So essentially what that means is when we have some sort of radical like the square root of 4, we've learned that the answer is 2 because 2 times 2 equals 4. Similarly, when we have the square root of negative 4, we also know that we cannot take a negative square root because no two numbers will multiply to a negative. If I have 2 times 2, that's a positive 4. If I have negative 2 times negative 2, that's also a positive 4. So the way that we deal with this is we say, okay, this is the same thing as the square root of 4 times the square root of negative 1, which is the same thing as the square root of 4 times I. So key concept that you need to walk away from this video understanding is that the square root of negative 1 equals I. That's how we'll use I. I can continue simplifying, and as I do, I get the square root of 4, which is 2I. And this is exactly what I'm going to box in to Schoology, what I'm going to type into the box on Schoology. So let's do a couple of examples. You're going to see 3 or 4 different styles. So let's talk about style 1. Style 1 is going to be some sort of square root that you know that you can simplify. So square root of negative 16. That's the same thing as 4I. Square root of negative 9. That's the same thing as 3I. Square root of negative 169 is the same thing as 13I. So you can see that in each one of these, I take the perfect square and I add the I. That's style 1. Let's do one more. Square root of negative 144 equals 12I. Let's go to style 2. In style 2, it'll be some sort of radical that you cannot simplify. So square root of negative 17. Well, that's the same thing as the square root of 17I. Square root of negative 10. That's the same thing as the square root of positive 10I. And notice the I is outside of the square root each time. Square root of negative 19. That's the same thing as the square root of 19I. Square root of negative 22 is the square root of 22I. Let's go to style 3. So you've kind of seen style 1. You've kind of seen style... Slight technical glitch, sorry. This is style 3. And what you'll see is you'll have some sort of square root, like the square root of 18, negative 18. And you know that that's going to be, make that a better negative, that's going to be the square root of positive 18I, but then you can simplify that further, because you know that this is the square root of 9 times the square root of 2 times I. So again, I've broken down 18 times 9 times 2. Well, we know the square root of 9 is 3. Then we have the square root of 2. Then we have I. Let's do another one. Square root of negative 24. So the square root of negative 24 is the same thing as the square root of positive 24I, which is the same thing as the square root of 4 times the square root of 6 times I, which is the same thing as 2 times the square root of 6 times I. Let's do another one. Square root of negative 75. That's the same thing as the square root of positive 75 times I, which is the same thing as the square root of 25 times the square root of 3 times I, which is the same thing as 5 times the square root of 3I. Let's do one more. Square root of negative 45. That's the same thing as the square root of positive 45 times I, which is equal to the square root of 9 times the square root of 5 times I, which is equal to 3 square root of 5I. And again, this last thing you're seeing here is what you'll type into the Schoology box. When you do square root, it looks like this. 5 SQRT parentheses 3 parentheses I. So again, if I'm doing each of these, then this one's going to look like 3 square root parentheses 2 parentheses I. 2 square root parentheses 6 parentheses I. 3 square root parentheses 5 parentheses I. So that's how you'll be typing those ones in. The same thing's true in style 2. This will actually be written as, and I'll change colors here. This is actually going to be written as square root parentheses 17 parentheses I. This is square root, SQRT, parentheses 10 parentheses I. This is SQRT parentheses 19 parentheses I. And the last one is SQRT parentheses 22 parentheses I. I'm going to jump to my final style, which is style 4, and this will be a little bit of a combination of both of these. So we've got style 4, and style 4 is going to look something like the square, or 6 plus the square root of negative 4. And you're going to simplify that to say 6 plus the square root of positive 4i, which is the same thing as 6 plus 2i. Now, the temptation is going to be to write this as, oh, that is 8i. That is wrong. That's a common error. Don't do that. You want to finish your answer. You want to finish your answer right here at 6 plus 2i. That's how you want to finish your answer. If you continue to simplify it, you will be wrong. So here's your next example. 8 plus the square root of negative 18. Well, that's the same thing as 8 plus the square root of positive 18i, which is the same thing as 8 plus the square root of 9 times the square root of 2i, which is the same thing as 8 plus 3 radical 2i. And again, when you write this one in, it's going to be 8 plus 3 SQRT parentheses 2 parentheses I. That's how you'll type it into Schoology. Let's do another one. Let's say that we have 17 plus the square root of negative 9. That's going to be the same thing as 7 plus square root of positive 9i, which is equal to 7 plus 3i, which does not get simplified. You're going to leave it as this. Do not put 10i. That is wrong. That's wrong. Wrong. This is wrong. You're going to want to do this. Everybody does this when they learn about these, and they're wrong. Do not continue to simplify. Leave it right here, 7 plus 3i. You cannot combine our real numbers, which is like numbers we're used to, with imaginary numbers. Anything with an I, you cannot do that. Okay, last one. Last example here is going to be square root of 16 plus square root of negative 16. Okay, so what you're thinking right now, what most of you are thinking is, oh, sweet, that's 0. Well, let's go ahead and simplify it. Well, this is the same thing as 4 plus the square root of 16i, which is equal to 4 plus 4i. Did that turn out to be 0? No, it did not. So I want you to really be careful when you're using these to always simplify to I so that you can get the correct answer. And again, that's what you'll type into Schoology. I actually want to do one more. I know I lied to you, but it's because I don't want you to see anything on your homework more difficult than what I'm showing you here. So let's do one more, and let's just say that it's 11 plus the square root of negative 50. Well, that's going to turn out to be 11 plus the square root of positive 50i. That's a weird looking 50. There we go. Which is the same thing as 11 plus the square root of 25 times the square root of 2i, which becomes 11 plus 5 square root of 2i. And then we know to type that in, we've got 11 plus 5 SQRT, parentheses 2, parentheses I. And that's really it. If you can do all 4 of those styles, you will have no problem with the homework. If you have questions, feel free to ask questions on Schoology or come and ask me, and we'll get you taken care of. Good luck.